Welcome to When We Talk podcast, a place where we talk about everything from relationships, marriage, being single, conflict in marriages, conflict in relationships. We talk about it all. This episode is hosted by Kenneth and Reggie Smith. Thank you for listening. This is Kenneth Bonner.
And this is Reggie Smith coming to you from Southern California.
So you're listening to our podcast. As you heard from the introduction, this is When We Talk. The goal of our podcast is to basically reach the heart of people and kind of introduce new ideas and ways to resolve conflict, whether it be in marriage, relationships. It doesn't matter. We'll also try to provide tips in every conversation to help you out in life. One of the topics we want to talk about today is the importance of communication in marriage. On our first episode, we kind of talked about men dealing with women's attitudes and some of the resolutions that we come up with when we have issues with marriage. But I don't think we elaborated enough on how important communication is.
Exactly. I think that by it being our first time, we were kind of going in on a dry run, kind of going off the cuff. But I think that we will now have the opportunity to kind of indulge more into and go in depth as far as the needs and the importance of communication, effective and appropriate and proper communication between a man and a woman.
So what defines appropriate and appropriate communication?
I think one of the things that help define it is everything should come from a respect factor. Tone is everything. But just like that, tone coming from a man and tone coming from a woman is different. So as both are communicating, there needs to be some balanced ground. There needs to be a mutual respect, and you have to learn not to talk at the person, but learn to talk to the person. And when that goes out of the confines of the communication aspect, that's when things tend to get a little sketchy.
I agree. Talking to me, I like to be talked to. I don't like to be talked at.
Right.
And I think women feel the same way. Sometimes when we're frustrated as men and we want to talk to women or express a concern that we have, we tend to talk down on them.
Exactly.
And it's not intentional, but sometimes we get in that, we stick our chest out and I'm already upset.
Mm-hmm.
I feel disrespected or whatever the case may be. So I'm going to talk down on you just to make you feel the same way that I feel. Exactly. And I think that women do the same thing because sometimes men, we can pull back, but I do think sometimes women take gut shots. And what I mean by that is they go for the jugular.
Yeah.
And it may not be intentional.
Yeah.
But when a woman's hurt by the way you're talking to her or communicating with her, you can really touch a nerve that you don't want to touch.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And with that, going for the jugular, they have a tendency to come out with the claws. And especially when and especially when emotions are high. And men have emotional issues in communication as well. But women also, when they're coming from an emotional standpoint, you tend to lose at times logic and rationale. And then everything is kind of thrown out of the window. But if you say the wrong thing to that woman, come the wrong way, come sideways, she will cut you in half. So knowing that, and also knowing your spouse, my spouse, I can't just talk to her any type of way. If so, it's going to be World War III and IV. So you have to you have to know your spouse. And also you have to know that balance and always try your best to stay within the realms of respect.
So you say know your spouse. I completely agree with you, and this is one of the things that I don't do. I don't think a lot of people do. This is some good information for single folks. I don't think that they study the person that they're dating enough.
Exactly, I agree.
And I say that because we have this fear factor, whether it's men or women. We have this fear factor of being alone, and because we don't want to be alone, we tend to jump in relationships too quick.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, you need to study the person that you're dating. I'm talking about studying how they're spending money, studying what they're doing with their time, studying what their interests are, all of those things matter. Study how they handle differences. Study how they communicate. Because if those things are not paid attention to, if those things are not studied in the beginning, we'll go ahead and overlook these things. And once we get married, then all of these things start becoming problems. But we overlooked them when we dated them because we were just so caught up in the moment, and again, when you don't study these things or even pay attention to how people communicate, then you end up in a situation where, like you're talking about, World War III, because we didn't study our partners. We don't know how they respond or what they respond to or the best way to communicate to them.
Exactly. And it's funny that you bring it up because I just told my wife that, from day one, even though we were in a long distance relationship, I started, from a distance, listening to her. Then when I finally came to California, I started studying her habits. So, and my wife would tell you, I know every little movement, how she walks. I can tell what's wrong, different things, because I took the time to study her. The problem that, like you said, runs into relationships is that when you're, especially in the beginning of a relationship, it's that euphoric excitement and emotions are high. And then you tend to miss those things that you should be looking out for. And then time goes on, and then you said, I do, and time went on. And now you're wondering, where did all this come from? Well, it was there all along. But because you allowed your emotions to be your guide, you tend to miss that. So I knew from day one, from a couple of conversations with my wife, all right, she ain't nothing to be played with. She ain't passive. And we are both driven. We are both forward thinkers and things like that. And so that tends sometimes to clash, two strong personalities clashing. And sometimes it's like two rams in a closet butting heads. But
man,
you learn how.
You speaking volumes right now, bro.
Yeah, but you learn as the time go on to, and I'll keep saying this, to try to find some balance. And when you get when emotions are high, I don't think that neither person wants to say the things that they say, because when you're emotional, again, you're not thinking rationally or logically, and things are said. And now, because you stepped outside of those boundaries, now you indulge into other things and you have to clean up that mess and then the new mess that you made. So it's a lot.
It's a lot, but I do feel that it's important to be in a relationship where you study your partner and study communication. I don't think that people value communication enough, and they don't realize how many marriages are saved or relationships are saved simply by communicating effectively.
Agreed.
And like you, I knew by the second time I dated my wife that, this is not the one that wants to play games or will be playing games.
Right.
And, you and I joke about it a lot that, again, they cut from the same cloth because I don't know what happened, but for some odd reason, God made them twins.
Agreed.
Because when we have those brother talks and we talk about like, man, well, this is what I got going on, man. I need to go ahead and get this rectified. And you be like, dude, are you serious? I'm dealing with the same thing,
Right.
And it may be funny, but at the same time, it helps me out because they're so similar that when you tell me how you resolve some of your issues, then I can share with you how I resolve some of my issues. Right. Then we're able to, make it right.
Exactly.
And so,
agreed.
Again, this, we talked last time on the other show about women being more emotional when they talk and not thinking that quick. But, that was, of course, my opinion. But at the same time, I still feel like, they do communicate a lot from their emotions. Yeah. And you said it a couple seconds ago that people say things that they don't want to say, in those heat of the moments. I feel like we all really have to always take a step back, reevaluate the situation, and change our approach. It's just kind of like if you just come in a conversation all heated with all your anger, you could potentially end up in divorce, or you could potentially end up, your relationship could be split, all because you didn't take a step back to reevaluate things and figure out how we need to handle the situation. And so, bro, I think this is some good information.
I also want to say this, and I touched on this briefly on the last segment, is that a lot of us don't want to admit it, but a lot of us have suffered from our own version of PTSD, coming from
Right.
relationships where they were very volatile, either emotionally, physically, psychologically. And sometimes we bring that residue into another relationship and it causes triggers. And we have to learn that we have to somehow try to get rid of that before we enter into this relationship, because it can cause a cancer. Because, and I'll give an example, my last relationship, spent a great deal of time towards the end, we were fighting verbally. And so I come into this relationship, and let me take a step back. Prior to that, 10 years ago, I could fight with you all day verbally. We can go at it 24 hours. I could play that word game with you all day long. But this last relationship drained me. So now, I give it to my wife. She's the better communicator, because I kind of want to just stay kind of quiet and avoid the conflict because I spent so much time doing it. And that's just being honest, that I probably haven't really got rid of that residue from the last relationship. And sometimes we need to learn how to fix that. And the only way that can be fixed that with time and prayer, and really kind of refocusing back on yourself to realize that, hey, I'm not in this relationship anymore, but somehow we have to learn how to deal with those triggers, because it could be the littlest thing and we automatically go into the defense mode. And you have to know that when you're with your spouse, you shouldn't have to be in defense mode all the time, but sometimes it's just the nature of the beast.
But that's wisdom, man. That's wisdom, because the reality of that and what you said is that a lot of us carry baggage from previous relationships, whether it's PTSD or just the thought process or the way we communicated. And like you, the last relationship before my wife, it was horrible. And we spent the latter days fighting, you know what I'm saying? And I feel like, you know, I'm where I'm supposed to be in this relationship right now, because before I said I do this time, I made sure I went and did research. You know, remember the book you recommended to me? I think it was by Gary Smalley,
Oh,
If Only
yeah,
He Knew.
yeah,
One of
yeah,
that book, and
yeah,
that's a free
yeah,
plug. But
yeah.
but that book definitely brought some insight as to the importance of communication, how men should, you know, respond, or how we should react, or certain things that we should do. And I feel like if you're not challenged enough to be a better person than you are, if you're not challenged enough to be a better communicator than you are, then you're going to continue to go through that cycle that we've been through, that vicious cycle of staying up to 6 o'clock in the morning arguing,
Whew.
you know, going to work tired and
Yes,
getting no sleep. Whereas
yes.
to now, things have drastically changed for me, and my decision and my thought process and my communication is a lot different. Things have drastically changed for me in this relationship than any other relationship that I've been in, to the point to where, dude, I'm in bed about 8 o'clock, 8:30 at night. You know, I have peaceful sleep. I don't have
Right.
that, you know, goodness, I didn't get sleep, I still got to go to work. You know, I don't have those issues. And, you know, what I was saying earlier about we bring baggage in, it's like, if our goal is to be one and we're climbing this mountain because we got goals and dreams to reach, why am I bringing stuff from the past up the mountain trying to get to this new goal that I have in this
Right.
relationship? You know,
Right.
doing that will cause me to struggle going up that mountain. It'll cause me to have some unwanted situations. It'll make me struggle. It'll just be a lot of unnecessary things that I'll have to go through, because I'm still trying to carry baggage from the previous relationship.
Right.
And I haven't let go of how I communicated in the past. You know, bottom line, if you want your relationship to be effective, if you want your relationship to be successful, you have to make sure that you communicate properly. And I think that communication is probably, and I'm going out on a limb here, I think communication or lack of communication is probably the biggest reason for divorce. That's just my opinion. I could be wrong. Maybe we need to go and look for some statistics, but I think that that's probably a bigger issue than anything.
And I agree with that, because they say that the three biggest issues for divorce, why marriages fail, is sex, money, and communication. Well, if you look at it, if you're not communicating in sex, it's going to fail. If you're not
Exactly.
communicating in your finances, it's going to fail.
Exactly.
So communication is the common denominator in everything.
Right.
And if you keep that common denominator, then you should be able to focus on what's important and be able to navigate and keep it moving. But even though those are three separate entities, communication is the root of any type of breakdown in any type of relationship. It doesn't matter. It's a total breakdown. I want to go back to something that you said. You said that uh, uh, jugular. And I agree with that. But I also don't want to put the women out there. I have to say this too, that sometimes men, when they get in their emotions, like you said, they get prideful, start beating on their chest like King Kong.
Definitely.
They have a tendency to tear their women down.
Exactly.
When their responsibility is to build them up.
Mm-hmm.
So neither one of them is good. But you can't tear someone down and expect everything to be okay just by saying, "Oh, I'm just sorry," or whatever like that. It's just not good at all. So there's even proper ways. Statistics show that there is even proper ways to deal with conflict in the communication. It's
Right.
ways, and I think that we each need to take a lesson from that and learn how to properly communicate. You know, like my wife likes to get it done and over with within. If we have a fight at 7 o'clock, she's trying to get that thing taken care of before 7:10. Just like that. Me, on the other hand, I need time. You know what I'm saying? I need time to retreat to my corner sometime, to rethink the situation, maybe listen to some music and try to take the fire out. But my job is to never tear her down. And a lot of men are at fault at this. They tear their women down in arguments, and their responsibility is to always build them up, regardless of, even if she is going for the juggler, even if she says some of the most horrible things. As the man, our responsibility to our wives should never be to tear them down. Never.
I completely agree. And,
Yeah.
and just touching on that fact about you said going for the juggler, just to clarify, them going for the juggler, it has to be initiated by something or triggered by something. You
There you
know,
go.
they're not just going to go for the jugular.
No,
you know,
no.
and I hope that's not misconstrued. But
I hope not either. Right.
yeah, but you're right. You're definitely right. And the whole thing about your wife, you have to cover her in prayer. You have to build her up. You have to speak life into her. And the same thing as wives, they need to speak life into the husband. I think it's something that should be reciprocated. I don't think that one person should be speaking life into the other one and the other one is not speaking life, because you won't have an effective relationship. I mean, look around you. Look at how many marriages are failing now because you got one person that's a communicator, the other one that's not a communicator, or one that's holding the marriage together and the other one's not trying to hold the marriage together. So it's something that needs to be reciprocated, and it's definitely an equal responsibility in every relationship, whether you're married or not, whether you're dating, you know, or trying to, or considering marriage. It's something that I think everybody needs to take time to evaluate, is how the person you're partnering with communicates. If you don't know how your wife or your husband communicate, then you need to take the time to sit down and study how they communicate. Look for the best ways to get through to them, the most effective ways. And I promise you, taking shots, going for the jugular, or belittling somebody and down talking your woman is not the correct way.
No, and you said something here as far as dating is concerned. During that dating process or the courting process, which you could tell, I'm kind of giving away my
Old
age.
school.
Yeah. Oh man, I lost train of thought. Oh, and you'd be surprised how many conversations I have with people in their marriages, and they say, "Oh well, she doesn't communicate, she doesn't talk, or he doesn't communicate, he doesn't talk." You should have known that during the dating process.
Exactly.
If he's a introvert, you should know that from the beginning. So if that's on your list, that you want somebody to be a strong communicator, and that's one of his qualities, then you shouldn't go into that relationship any further, even though he might meet some of them other ones. But since communication is the common denominator, you can't come around 10 years later and be like, I don't understand why he don't communicate. Well, he wasn't communicating when y'all was dating. He wasn't that type of person. She wasn't that type of person. So don't get into the relationship, the throes of the relationship later on, and now complain. You knew this and you took that chance. So now the only way is, and what I continue to say is that I tell people is that if you None of us can change each other. I can't change my spouse. My spouse can't change me.
Right.
That change needs to come on your knees.
Right.
Going to God.
Right.
And let God change them. And while God is working on them, ask him to work on you, and you work on you.
Exactly.
And eventually, in time, you'll start to see a change. But don't give up. Be steadfast and unmovable, like the Bible says, and long suffering. And because eventually things will start to change. But I have an issue with people, because I always ask, well, were they doing that while y'all were dating? Yeah. How long did you guys date? We dated for 2 years. So you mean to tell me in 2 years you knew that he wasn't a good communicator, and you guys got married anyway? Yeah. So what do we really have to talk about?
Man, that's you opening up a can of worms, man. There's a whole lot of meat in what you said, but we're gonna save it to the next show. But man, I really appreciate this talk, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people will get a lot out of it, because most people don't know why they're stuck in their relationship right now. And I guarantee that the biggest cause is communication. Again, it's the lack thereof, or the way that we're communicating. And if we don't begin to communicate properly and take the tips that we talked about, like you said, study your mate, let go of the baggage, put all that stuff behind you, your marriage can be successful. Your marriage can turn around. Any situation that you're in can turn around if you add your faith, your belief to it. And look at yourself, evaluate yourself. Make sure that you're not the one that's communicating the wrong way. And make sure you're not pointing fingers. Because if you're the one pointing fingers, if you're the one that's not communicating, then you need to study some people or your mate and figure out the best way to communicate to your partner.
Exactly. I want to say this too, as we get ready to head towards the end. When both partners are not communicating properly, guess who's always communicating? That's God. That song that said God is trying to tell you something.
Right.
God is trying to tell you some things during your courting phase, during your relationship, but he's the best communicator.
Exactly.
But just like with everything else, we don't listen. So God is communicating and letting you know, hey, this might not be the right person for you, or you need to do A, B, and C, but we don't listen. So since we don't listen to God, a lot of times it's a depiction of how we don't listen to our spouses and certain things as well.
Right.
It all comes around full circle. God is always speaking in any way, shape, or form, but we don't listen. And that's key. A lot of times, communication is more than just talking. It's listening. Listening to what God is saying, but then also sometimes in the heat of an argument, sometimes your spouse might say something that they might drop a nugget and be like, oh, snap. But if we all the way up here at the top, at the highest pinnacle of the argument, we're not going to hear that. That's why it's best to somehow keep everything at a baseline to where I can talk, but I can still hear at the same time. Because when both people are arguing, nobody's hearing nothing. We're all trying to find safer ground or higher ground to take control, and it doesn't work. But if you're listening to God, get in the habit of listening to God, proper communication, you'll also get in the habit of having proper communication with your spouse.
I completely agree with that. And I guarantee if that relationship is not right with God, then that marriage or that other relationship probably ain't right either.
Yeah, it's going to fall.
And that's my opinion. Of course, that's my opinion. Because there are people that are not Christians or believers that do have successful relationships.
Exactly.
But I guarantee that the relationship could be much more better than what it is with God as the center and the head of it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, that concludes our show for today. Thank you again for tuning in and listening to When We Talk podcast. You could also visit our website at whenwetalk.net. Please like, share, subscribe. Also, leave us some comments. Let us know what you think about the show, as well as topics you would like to hear us talk about. Thank you again for tuning in. But we can't close the show without Reggie's last thoughts. So, Reggie, go ahead and drop a little bit of wisdom on us before we go.
The only thing I can say is that my favorite passage of scripture is from Proverbs 3:5-6. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart. Lean not to thine own understanding, but in all thy ways acknowledge him in communication, and he'll direct your path. So as I sign out, my motto is always keep your head up, keep God first, and keep it moving.